Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of all things books, bookish, booktube, anything else I want to talk about. Today I thought I'd start off by doing a wrap-up of my November reading. I did participate in two read-alongs in November. One was the Skoden read-along where you read works by Indigenous authors, and the other was Nonfiction November, and I kind of blended the two of those things together. And there's some crossover, but I did want to talk about those books. So the first book I want to talk about is Housemaid of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. This is the story of a young man who is a veteran, I believe, of World War II, who comes back to the United States after serving in war, and he experiences a lot of traumas. He experiences a lot of issues with addiction and poverty and racism. And it really is a book, I think, which kind of beautifully ties together, or perhaps offers a way forward. It's a fiction book, so it's not prescriptive, but kind of offers a way forward or an idea of this character being able to move forward by embracing his Native American heritage and traditions, which he only really realizes near the end of the book. But I just thought it was really beautifully written. It is very confusing, or it was to me in the beginning, exactly which characters are who and who's doing what, and the timelines are kind of mixed up. But it is well worth the read. Once you get a handle on how the author handles the transition from one character's point of view to another, once you get a handle on that and the way in which the story is kind of told in an indirect way and the relationship with the characters, it flows beautifully, and it is beautifully written, beautiful descriptions of the natural world and the physical world, and really deep emotional resonance. And I really think it's a great book. Highly recommend it to anyone. So that was one of my Skoden books that I wanted to read. One of my books by a Native American or Indigenous author that I wanted to read. The second I read was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I talked about this book already. It is essentially Kimmerer, who is a naturalist, a PhD scientist. It is really her kind of, I think, I hesitate to call it a manifesto, but her kind of prescription for how we can, deal with the problems of climate change by embracing essentially a different idea about the relationship between humanity and plants and animals and the planet itself, and by kind of embracing more of a reciprocal relationship, and rather than one of dominance to the other, between mankind and the rest of and all the other living creatures on the planet. And it does that by connecting to Native American practices and beliefs, sometimes rituals, in which and trying to make the case that if we adopted those points of view about how we deal with the natural world, then we would be able to solve a lot of our climate-related issues, our environmental-related issues, in a much more effective way. And I just thought it was beautifully written, incredibly moving and powerful, and just a really, really great book. I'm not, a big reader of, sorry, I'm trying to get my phone list to come back up. I'm not a big reader of nature writing, but this was just really great. And the third book I read for the Skoden read-along was Red Nation Rising by a number of indigenous authors. One of those authors was Nick Estes, who wrote a book which was one of my favorite books of last year, called Our History is the Future, which is kind of a call to Native Americans to embrace their tradition of resistance in order to reclaim their rights, in order to resist efforts by the government and corporations and businesses to infringe on their land. I just thought that book was great, so I read Red Nation Rising, which really is a manifesto about how we should all be embracing this idea of reversing the damage done and changing policies which lead to discrimination and death and genocidal actions against the Native American population of the United States. It is not a call necessarily for, peace and love and understanding. It's also not a call for violence, but it is a call for real action and real kind of connecting all these dots together. And it equates essentially capitalism with these attacks on and this attitude and our history of genocidal action towards Native Americans. I thought it was really powerful. I would have to reread it again to see if in the second reread, I agreed with all the positions that were made, but it is a very effective case. I thought it was a really powerful read, and it made me aware of all kinds of discrimination taking place in what the authors refer to as border towns, and they focus a lot on towns in New Mexico and their treatment of Native Americans. These border towns would be towns just outside of Native American reservations where there are lots of liquor stores and high rates of houselessness among Native American population, and all kinds of ways in which those communities prey on the Native American population. Anyway, it was a really powerful read, and I really enjoyed it. So two of those titles, I believe, qualified for the prompts for Nonfiction November, which right now have completely left my mind. But the other titles I read for Nonfiction November are not didn't have anything to do necessarily with Native American or indigenous reading or authors. So I also read River of the Gods, which, if anything, is the most colonialist book that I read. River of the Gods is written by one of my favorite popular historians, Candice Millard, and it basically tells the story of Sir Richard Francis Burton and his attempt to find the source of the Nile. And his expedition in Africa to find the source of the Nile. It tells us a lot about Richard Francis Burton and his competitors and some of the people who went with him. And I found the story to be pretty interesting, but it is not, in my opinion, Millard's best book. And while she acknowledges the complete racism and colonialist attitude of Burton and the other Englishmen who took part in this effort to find the source of the White Nile, she is still, in a way, celebrating those men who did that, and you can take that however you want to. But as always, she is a master of deciding, of using her information, of picking the things that are most interesting and introducing them into her narrative in the best possible places to create a real kind of narrative flow. And even though you know the outcome, or maybe you know the outcome of these stories, she's able to create tension, and that is, I think, a real gift. I also read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is just really, I think today, a foundational read for anyone wanting to understand the current situation of racism and race relations in the United States of America. And essentially she argues that with the collapse, because of the Civil Rights Movement, of Jim Crow segregation, things like that, legal segregation by race, that quickly politicians and the white majority rushed in to create a new system which allowed them to have control over and to reassert their position, essentially, of white supremacy over African Americans through the criminal justice system, beginning with Nixon and law and order politics, and carrying on through Reagan and his, talk about welfare mothers and welfare queens, in which he intentionally created images of black women and black people taking advantage of the system, all the way through the crime bill of the Clinton administration. By the way, I think I might have mentioned this before. If any president comes off looking really bad in the new Jim Crow, I think it's actually, to me, it was Bill Clinton who ends up looking the worst. But essentially, she makes a really powerful case that, particularly with the war on drugs, what we began doing was incarcerating large numbers of African American men for crimes that we were, A, not policing in white communities, and B, punishing more harshly when they involved African American men. And that has created this system of continued poverty, deprivation of rights. It's just a great, great, powerful, I think, incredibly important book that anybody should read. And then I also read The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, and the subtitle of Sum of Us is What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. And she makes a powerful argument, I think, and I thought this book was wonderful and just really, really pinpoint effective at kind of addressing the issues that exist in the United States on race, and how those in power, and I'm going to say those in economic power, have traditionally used their ability to divide black people from white people and others, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans as well, to divide us from one another as a way of preventing us from uniting to demand greater economic justice and greater economic opportunities, and that if we overcame those racial divisions, which, you know, have been forced on us since, you know, Virginia began making laws about African Americans being enslaved people way back in the 1660s, all the way through today, that if we overcame those racial divisions, it would benefit everybody. That, you know, a lot of white Americans in the United States think that by voting for Republicans who want to cut social services and want to cut welfare programs or whatever, or, you know, who talk about, you know, getting tougher on crime, that if instead of doing that, we banded together and didn't let those things divide us, that it would benefit everyone, that white people, black people, everybody benefits from coming together and creating this kind of unity. And it's just a really great book. And again, I would say I think it's pretty foundational to understanding racism and the situation of race in the United States of America today. Just a really, really great book. So I had a really good reading month in terms of Skoden and in terms of nonfiction November. But I also read some other books. My audiobook this month was The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. I finished that up. I went on a trip yesterday to see my mom, and I finished it up. So technically I didn't finish it up until December started, but I was listening to it as an audiobook, and it's just so brilliant. I don't know how Edith Wharton manages to create, with pinpoint accuracy, these characterizations of people, of her characters, and to have us understand them better, see their evolution, understand things we didn't know about them over time with such pinpoint accuracy. Her use of the English language to create subtlety and nuance and revelations is just remarkable. And I won't spoil the book, but when Newland Archer realizes the most important thing in the novel, we realize at the same time, and we realize it exactly as he does, and with all its implications, and it is just brilliant. And I am, you know, way an Edith Wharton fan now, and I will continue to read whatever Edith Wharton I can get my hands on. Let's see. I also am participating in the World Cup read-along, which is hosted by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. And my first country was Poland, and so I picked The Soccer War by Ryszard Kapuscinski. And Kapuscinski was a journalist, and so The Soccer War isn't a book, it's a book of essays. And I read about 40% of those, because the idea is you read a book by an author from the country that you're assigned. I was assigned Poland, and Poland won their first 2 games. So I was reading it during those first 2 games, and then they lost their 3rd game in group play to Argentina. And so I picked up Ficciones by Borges to read because Argentina had won, because the idea is that whatever country beats your team, you read a book by an author from that country. Well, you know, I didn't get to Ficciones fast enough, and so now we're on to the knockout round, the round of 16, and I'm back on Poland. So I did start reading the Borges, and I'm going to continue reading the Kapuscinski as we go into December. But getting back to the Kapuscinski book, since I read more of that and just barely started the Borges book, the essay on him meeting Patrice Lumumba, who should have been the leader of what became Zaire, or the Belgian Congo. On meeting him, I thought was just really brilliant and really well done. Kapuscinski is a Polish writer, so when he writes about Africa or people in Africa, he brings with it that kind of colonial attitude. But I still thought there was some really powerful writing there and some really good stuff, and I will finish The Soccer War at some point. So there you go. That is my wrap-up, really long wrap-up for November. And so real quickly, I want to talk to you about my TBR, or my pile of possibilities for December. So the good news in a way for me in December is that I'm not participating in any read-along, so I can read whatever the heck I want to. And I'm doing a buddy read this week with Roz from Scallywandling About the Books, and we are reading Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson, which is a really short novella. We're just going to read it this weekend, and talk about it on Wednesday. I'm really looking forward to that, and I have started it, and I am enjoying it. As I said, I'm going to carry over with reading the Kapuscinski and the Borges this month as well. But, you know, I've been seeing a lot of people doing videos about reading what you own and not buying books and setting these really high numbers of books they're going to read before they go from their own shelves they're going to buy. And I'm not going to do that in a real way. But I was looking around. I came in here to look at books for another idea for a video, and I realized that I have books on my book cart that I haven't read, and so I wanted to talk about that. I thought, well, December would be a good month to read books from my book cart. Now, if you don't know, I do have a book cart. Before I moved the couch in here, it sat in that corner, and since I moved the couch in here, it's been over here by my chair. And I don't know if you know this or not, but at one time, all the cool kids on BookTube had a book cart. Theirs were actually library carts, which were way cooler than mine. I found this cart in my daughter's room. After she moved out of her dorm in college, she didn't need this cart anymore. I thought, I'll just make this my book cart, and I'll put books on there that are new. I'll read them before I put them on the shelf. I've done none of that. Essentially, my book cart just became another place to store books. So I thought, what? In the spirit of this, read what you own thing, I'm going to spend December, hopefully, at least partially reading books that I have on my cart, because I definitely own them. They're right here. So I thought, I'm just going to talk about the books in this cart. Maybe I'll find some I didn't know were in there, and I'll read some of those books. Not all of them, because there are way more books here than I can read in a month. But the book on the top, which I may read this month, is Telephone by Percival Everett. If you've watched my channel for any period of time at all this year, you know that Percival Everett's The Trees is my favorite book of the year. And so I'm really tempted to read this one. I believe this was nominated for, one of the major literary prizes as well. And Percival Everett could be my new kind of literary crush. By the way, I use that term all the time in kind of a, and I know a lot of people don't like the term, so let me make one more attempt at talking about when I say literary crush, what I mean is like that new author or it could be a character that you're introduced to that you just become kind of enamored of and fascinated with. Kind of like when you meet somebody new and you're going to be friends. That feeling. That's what I mean by literary crush. And I think Percival Everett is, well on his way to doing that. I did buy a copy of A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. I've never read this. I've read 2 other Egan novels. I bought it at some point and then it ended up in my book cart. I might read that this month. I know a lot of people, I know The Candy House, which is in some ways maybe a follow-up to this, is, one of the top picks for the books of the year this year. I have Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I got this from Greg over at Supposedly Fun in kind of a book exchange. I sent him a book, he sent me this one back. I might do that. I think the book that's been in here the longest is The Night Watch by Sarah Waters. Sarah Waters is kind of a BookTube darling author, or she used to be. I've never read any of her books, and I found this beat up copy at Half Price Books. I've never read it, so maybe that. I have Vera by Stacy Schiff. I believe this is the book that Stacy Schiff won Pulitzer for. Is that right? She won some award. Yes, I was a finalist for Pulitzer, and I really like Stacy Schiff's Cleopatra, so I bought this book, and I believe she has a book that's nominated for, or one of the top 10 books of the year, according to the New York Times or somebody this year, and I'm interested in that one as well. Oh, wow. I forgot that I had picked up at the same time I got Sarah Waters' book. I got a copy of Barbara Kingsolver's The Lacuna, which was recommended to me as another Barbara Kingsolver book. The only one I've ever read is The Poisonwood Bible. And I know Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead is, making a lot of buzz for Book of the Year as well. So that's there. Maybe that one. I have a copy of Idaho by Emily Ruskovich, which I know I bought for some reason, but I can't remember. I've never read. I have Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. Only Ray Bradbury I've ever read is Fahrenheit 451, so that's in there. Let's see, what is this book? Oh, it's A Tale of Two Cities. This is just a hardback copy of A Tale of Two Cities. I've already read that, so I won't be reading that this month. And I have already read Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, so that's a book I've read. Let's see what's on the second shelf here. I've got The Door by Magda Szabo. That's definitely a possibility. Heard only good things about, see, I still have the Half Price Bookstore sticker on there. Only good things about this book and Magda Szabo. Oh, I have an Elmore Leonard I forgot I had. This is called Riding the Rap. Again, a book I got at Half Price Bookstores when I was just picking up Elmore Leonard titles, I believe. That's always fun to read Elmore Leonard. Oh, I have, at the same time I got Tana French, a novel. This is called The Likeness. I believe this is the second book in the Adam Gamache series, which I didn't realize when I picked it up, or maybe I did, I don't remember, but I think I want to read the first one before I get to that, so I won't be reading that this month, I don't believe. Oh, and then I have 2 old history books that I got from my daughter's book haul, or books, when she was cleaning out her room. One is The Hanged Man, by Robert Bartlett, a story of miracle memory and colonialism in the Middle Ages. Kind of interesting. And then The First Empire, Z, Power and Identities in the British Isles, 1093 to 1343. Probably not going to read that one. This Hanged Man book sounds really interesting. Anyway, there you go. There is my TBR pile of possibilities. All books from my book cart, other than the ones I already read. Oh, and I do like to read a Balzac novel in December, so I may do that as well. I think this video is long enough. I know usually in my Hodgepodge videos that I talk about things that are not, strictly speaking, you know, wrap-ups, TBRs, but this has gone on long enough. And I haven't, you know, recently I haven't really been in all that festive a mood about things for, you know, stuff that's gone on with my life and family recently. So I think I'm just going to leave it there at that. I look forward to your comments about any of these books, anything that I've read or said in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.